I list this number 1 because it's going to overlap several of the other things, and so we'll leave it at that for now. But just a definitive ending, not something that's open-ended, that is open for interpretation about what happens after the series ends. Number 2, the Iron Throne has to be sorted out. HBO did a weird marketing thing with season 8 where they used the hashtag for the throne, which seems kind of out of place. The throne is important, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that it was sort of like this thing that, hey, everybody wants this Iron Throne, whenever in the background there's a much more serious threat that we've been waiting to see, which is what we're leading up to, right? This is foreshadowed so much in the story that a lot of people had been led to think that the Iron Throne won't even matter at the end of the day. I tend to think that it will, but one way or the other, something has to happen so that we know how that went down. Whether Jon lives and he ends up on the throne and there's this bittersweet reason why that's not a great thing, whether Cersei keeps it, whether it's destroyed, something has to happen in a way that it is clear as to the status of the Iron Throne at the end of the series. Number 3, the army of the dead has to be stopped. I tend to think that in the show that the army of the dead, the Night King, all of the White Walkers are going to be destroyed, but there are a lot of other possibilities that could make sense as well, such as a pact with them where they go back and they leave people alone, they leave Westeros alone. Either way, they have to be stopped. They can't be a looming threat at the end of the final episode. I'll be talking about some of those theories and things in other videos and in more of this video later, so we'll just leave it at that. Number 4, it has to be bittersweet. I'm sure you've heard this if you're a fan. The author, George R.R. Martin, has always said that it would be a bittersweet ending. He told the showrunners what he imagined to be the end, and they've been working towards that the whole time. Of course, bittersweet means that there'll be things that are good and there'll be things that are sad. That's a pretty simple way to look at it. But it's not going to be a Disney ending or a completely shocking, nihilistic ending. He's been pretty specific about the word bittersweet. This leaves a lot of different possibilities based on what we know and what we think is going to happen. But it's pretty essential that we walk away thinking like, wow, that is actually pretty bittersweet. Number 5, some characters have to be redeemed, and we have several redemption arcs going on. I don't know if we'll get resolutions to all of them. It's definitely possible. The 3 that stand out are the Hound, Jaime Lannister, and Theon Greyjoy. It's funny when you think about it, all 3 of these characters have done really terrible things. They've all been in the process of redeeming themselves, but it kind of comes down to which character you prefer and whether you think they're redeemable or not. Like, a lot of people really love the Jaime redemption arc and the whole idea of him and Brienne and everything. For me, like, I love Bran. He's such an essential character for me that I never really have been able to get on board with Jaime's redemption. Also, his motivations seem a little bit off for me, but whatever, you know what I mean? Everybody's rooting for these 3 characters or not based on what they like. And I think that at least the majority of those have to be sorted out. I mean, obviously Theon is probably going to do something. Jaime is definitely, we saw him in the trailer by now. He's at the North fighting for the living, and the Hound is probably going to do something pretty cool as well. But that needs to, those things are just basic things that have to be finished up. Number 6, some of these journeys that we've gone on have to make sense. In particular, Bran and Arya, they both left home. They both spent several seasons on these long journeys. I think we get a little bit more of an idea that Arya's is, I don't know, it depends on what you think, but one way or another, her skills that she picked up in Bravo seem to be the most important thing about her journey. And then with Bran, he's obviously a very powerful character who has a very important part to play in the ending. But it's just one of those things. They sent them away for so long that I think there's going to be a lot of people upset if we don't feel like those journeys made some sense. Number 7, and this is no surprise, but some of the characters that we love will have to die. It is Game of Thrones. We're used to this. They've been a little bit wimpier about it, I would say, in the last couple seasons. Like the Field of Fire 2.0 or the Loot Train battle, like I still kind of, when I rewatch, I don't understand why they didn't kill somebody off in that. Bronn was ripe for the picking. Nobody died. Nobody important that we cared about died. And I think that in season 8, it's going to be the opposite. Everyone that we care about that isn't essential to the final endgame is going to die. But I mean, we need that. We need, battles, situations, there has to be a cost. I think like most people, I expect that one of the major characters, if not several of the major characters, are going to die. And I think at this point, it's really just necessary that happens for the story to be good. Number 8, there has to be at least one surprising twist. There could be a couple. There's definitely a lot of ideas out there as to what these are. But especially with the way that they're building up to this battle in the 3rd episode, there has to be something that we're just like, oh yeah, okay, well I didn't exactly see that coming in order for it to be enjoyable. That said, I don't think that this needs to come completely out of left field and try to shock us with something that we never would have thought of. But obviously, there's always been talk of that George R.R. Martin gave them 3 really crazy twists that they didn't think of. Dan and Dave, I'm speaking of. We've seen 2 of those with Hodor and Shireen. Something big has to happen. I tend to think that this is already baked in all the thinking that they have. I think this is something that they would have gotten from Martin himself, not something that they'll tack on out of their own thinking or whatever. So let's just hope they can land the plane in that regard. Number 9, life in the 7 kingdoms has to go on. I mean, I guess there's an outside chance that it won't, but I think we all can agree that it's most likely that there will be some version of Westeros left over after the War for the Dawn. After the White Walkers and the Night King are defeated, we have to be able to get some idea about what happens after, since we don't have 10 more seasons to see how life carries on. So this is kind of tricky, and I hope that they're able to do that in a way that gives us a satisfactory feeling of like, okay, so all of that happened. This is a cultural phenomenon that everyone has been involved with for years at this point. When we think back on the world of Westeros, how do we see everybody that lives there getting on? And number 10, it needs to leave us feeling like it was all worth it. This is a little bit vague, but I think that it's very unlikely that everyone's going to be completely happy on the way that the story ends. There's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of people that have been thinking about it, looking over the books, just really invested in their idea of how it all ends. So it's not possible that everyone's going to be happy that way. I think what needs to be the minimum is that when we look at it, we say, okay, I understand why everything happened in the way it happened. And yeah, I get it. This makes sense that they did it that way. More than that, though, I think it just has to make literal sense and narrative sense in that, yeah, this was okay. I see that the big idea came across, and damn, that's really cool that they ended it all and we feel good about it. Might not feel like we agree with what they did or anything else, but yeah, it's good. It ended. Way to go. Based off these 10 things, I'm going to go into several more videos before the season starts, but these are the things that I've been thinking about. As I mentioned, this really has been a cultural phenomenon, and I'll go into the next video that I've been working on already about how that is and how we might not see another show like this at all, if not soon. I mean, I'm really excited about the prequel, but I don't think it will have the same following and just excitement because it just doesn't happen very often. I mean, think about the other big shows that have had spinoffs lately. They're all good, but nobody watches them like they did the original. There's only certain things kind of rise up to that level, and Game of Thrones was that, and I don't think that we'll see another show like this based on some of the problems that, Netflix kind of brings into the game and everything else. Binge watching is a lot more common, a lot more money's going towards that compared to these shows that, you had to wait a whole week until you saw the next episode. You talk about it with your friends, your